everyone. Check 1, 2. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, awesome. It's so good to be here with you guys today. My name is Garry McIntosh. I am Director of Donor Relations with Operation Underground Railroad. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit about our cause and our story today. Before I do that, though, I do want to give a special thanks to redM for making this possible. I was born and raised here in Houston, and so to see like-minded individuals coming together to fight and combat what I consider the darkest corner of humanity right now, modern-day slavery, is really special to me. And I also want to thank everyone here. I see an OUR shirt out there. That's awesome. Yeah. I also want to thank everyone here for willingly and knowingly showing up to a presentation like this, because it isn't the lightest topic to discuss, right? It's dark and it can be certainly heavy. And so that's a testament to your passion, a testament to your interest in learning more about this issue and how to join us in fighting it. So I have some slides going here, but we might be waiting on those. That's no problem. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're dealing with at large. There's an estimated 30 to 40 million people right now in modern day slavery. That's actually more than there have ever been in the history of the world. If you add up all the individuals who were brought over during the transatlantic slave period, that's a fraction of what we're dealing with today. There's a quarter of them that are estimated to be children, about 10 million. They're sold for things like forced labor, like organ harvesting, like child sacrifice, and of course, child sex slavery, of which there's about 2 million around the world who are stuck in that atrocity right now. The average child in this is 13. It's a $150 billion a year industry. And just to give you a little bit of context on that, we did some research. That's Dell, that's Starbucks, that's all 32 NFL teams combined. That's $150 billion in revenue. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the history of the world. We get the question all the time, why is it growing so quickly? Why is it so prevalent? And the reason is because you can sell a bag of cocaine once, you can sell a precious child 5 to 10 times a day for years. The US is the highest demand for child pornography out of any country in the world, and it's one of the highest destinations for trafficking victims. Now, COVID. Recent statistics. There's been a 90% increase in tips to the national hotline for missing and exploited children. We're talking about millions of more cases reported this year as compared to this time frame last year. Unfortunately, we're not going to know what the repercussions of that are until 4 or 5 years down the road, probably. And the reason why I bring that up is because I just want to emphasize and highlight the vital and critical time that we're in. That organizations like OUR and like many of the others that you're going to hear from today, amazing organizations and stories that you're going to hear today, they need to be mobilized and activated in order to respond to this current season that we're in. So I know these statistics can feel perhaps overwhelming. They certainly overwhelm us sometimes. But OUR's been combating this issue for several years now. Let me see if I can catch up to my slides here. Okay. So OUR subscribes to 3 pillars. This is how we fight this problem. This is how we combat this issue. Emancipate, empower, and enlighten. And I'll cover a little bit about those things today. Emancipate is where OUR really got its start. OUR was founded by a man named Tim Ballard. Tim spent about 12 years in the Department of Homeland Security, and his role there was to infiltrate and break up child sex trafficking rings. He had a successful career there. He worked some high-profile cases, and one subset of his role was that he actually consulted and trained with foreign nations, foreign governments, foreign agents, and his role was to educate them on some of the tactics that were successful in his internet crimes against children task force teams. So Tim was doing this. He was going undercover, okay, as a covert operative infiltrating these child sex trafficking rings, disbanding them, and rescuing kids. When he was in these foreign places consulting with these other governments, the issue is that he would often find himself very easily learning where these kids are. We have very good laws in the US, jurisdictional laws, that prevent the US from being everything for everyone, right? So Tim was able to learn where these kids were, but he actually wasn't able to garner resources to go after them because there was no US connection or nexus to that case. Over time, this became an unacceptable reality for him, that he was aware of the fact that there were kids in these nations who had no hope. Nobody was going for them. Those nations themselves didn't have the resources or the bandwidth to really tackle this problem. He couldn't get help from the US because it wasn't a US case. And so he envisioned this public-private model. He envisioned an organization that wasn't constrained by jurisdiction, that could actually flow across state lines and across country lines. And so with the blessing of his wife, which is important, we know that, and the blessing of his former boss at the US Department of Homeland Security, he actually left his pension, his job, his salary. He had several kids at the time, I don't know how many. But he took a leap off the edge, and he founded OUR. He had enough funding to run 2 missions where he knew where kids are. There was no sustainability plan beyond that, in Haiti and Colombia, respectively. And it was very successful. They rescued hundreds of kids, and they arrested dozens of traffickers in that process. So we still do that today. We still have boots on the ground operators who are going into massage parlors, orphanages, these sort of fake shell places where these kids are being held, and they have forensic technology on them. They have hidden cameras, hidden audio devices. They're gathering evidence. The goal is to catch these predators and traffickers who are selling these kids and wanting to harm these kids. And when that happens, in partnership with local law enforcement, arrests are made, and there's another team that's dedicated to actually extract the kids and pull them out of there. All that evidence that's gathered along the way is turned over to prosecuting attorneys so that ultimately it ends up in arrest and ends the cycle of those traffickers selling kids. So that was 6 years ago. We still offer those services to now actually domestic partners here in the US, domestic law enforcement, and of course we still work overseas as well. There's some other ways that we've empowered law enforcement that we've learned along the way. Forensic technology. We have software that can actually monitor chatter on the dark web where child pornography is being traded and children are being exploited. It helps law enforcement identify the source of that pornography and capture those individuals and also remove kids from harm's way. Some more unconventional ways that we're supporting law enforcement. This here is an electronic device detection canine. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay. I didn't know too long ago, and I'm just learning this as well. So they act a lot like a drug sniffing dog, except they're not after drugs, they're after storage devices. And let me tell you why that's important. As an investigator, you don't want to leave the scene of crime without something that could ultimately prosecute someone who's harming a child. These predators, these individuals who are distributing and storing child pornography, child sexual abuse material, they're getting craftier, and they're hiding these storage devices in thumb drives, in hard drives, under carpets, behind walls, in safes. And these dogs are trained to find those things. This is the amazing part. So these dogs are on a path to be euthanized. We divert them from that path. We train them here in the US. We train them to detect these storage devices. We partner with law enforcement in the US and teach them how to work with these operators. And then we actually donate those dogs to those law enforcement so that they can start combating child trafficking in their community. These dogs have led to over 100 arrests, okay? And that's more than 5% of all of our arrests as an organization, so they're truly heroes. An added benefit that we found is that sometimes trafficking victims are asked to share testimony, give witness account to what they've experienced for prosecuting attorneys. And having these dogs in the room or nearby adds a sort of calming effect and extra security. So whenever that's possible, we try to use them in that way as well. Another unconventional thing that we're doing for law enforcement, this is called a mobile forensic lab. This was donated to a law enforcement department in Mesa, Arizona. When Tim was working as an operator, he would be in the midst of an investigation. And there's laws in the US that allow you to expedite to trial for certain crimes. Good laws. You can move to trial more quickly, and we all understand why that's important. But before you do that, you have to make sure that there's the proper chain of custody with the evidence. You have to make sure that the prosecuting attorney has all the evidence organized and analyzed in a way that can be used in the court of law. And so he was having to send this evidence to a third-party lab. Sometimes there's backlogs at these labs because of all the different cases that might be going on. Logical. However, the evidence would be analyzed and returned to the investigator, and maybe 3 weeks down the road, maybe a couple months down the road, and the investigator would learn that meanwhile, somebody was harming their next door neighbor's kid or harming some child. Just an unacceptable time frame to have to wait for information like that. And so what these mobile forensic labs allow investigators to do is analyze evidence on site. It leads to faster search warrants and leads to being able to move to trial more quickly, removing that, as we can understand, unacceptable time frame. Rescue is only half the mission. We say that a child is not really rescued unless they're also healed. And this is the reason why more than 50% of our resources as an organization is spent towards aftercare. And we actually won't rescue a child until we know for certain that there is a safe place for them to be after that rescue. That's why we partner with partner with aftercare homes in every single state and every single country that we work in. We have a staff that's dedicated 24/7 around the clock, literally visiting every single aftercare home that we support as an organization, visiting all the survivors, making sure they have what they need. We're providing food, clothing, shelter, counseling services, other professional services, therapies, et cetera. So these are all things that are really important for these victims to really start their healing journey. They're not victims, they're survivors actually, to start their healing journey. And our aftercare team is with them, celebrating those little wins that you get along the way. Really important for us as an organization. So 6 years ago, I told you we started with these 2 missions in Haiti and Colombia. This is where OUR is at today. We're operating in 28 states here domestically, 26 countries around the world. We've conducted over 1,200 operations, leading to over 2,300 arrests of predators and traffickers, over 4,100 survivors rescued, and we're in charge of over 6,000 survivors with aftercare services. Now, you'll notice that there's a discrepancy there between the amount of people that we're supporting in aftercare and those that we actually rescued. And I'm going to tell you just a quick story to give you one example as to why that's the case. I'm going to tell you about a survivor. Her name is Sabrina. That's not her real name, but that's what we use for confidentiality reasons. And around the office anyway, we call her Wonder Woman, and you'll find out why. Her story is just unbelievable. Sabrina was 7 when she was identified on an exploitative video. OUR put a plan together to remove her from that situation and arrest the individual that was harming her. One of the most powerful tools that a prosecuting attorney can use is witness testimony. But I just want you to put some logic with me on this subject for a moment. What you're really asking witnesses, those who've had firsthand experience of this trauma, to do is to relive those experiences, and it can be incredibly re-traumatizing. It should not be used as a first resort, even though it is a compelling tool in the court of law. It's just too traumatizing at times for the survivors. But Sabrina was approached with the opportunity to face those who had harmed her, and she bravely chose to participate. OUR aftercare team was with her throughout the entire process. They were even with her when she was giving the testimony. So During her testimony, she identified 2 other girls that were being harmed that law enforcement didn't previously know about. And if that's not incredible enough, she also identified 2 other individuals who were involved in harming those children. So the 2 girls that she identified have been rescued. They're now in aftercare services with Sabrina. And the 2 individuals who were harming those kids were arrested and face charges as well. So we're proud of Sabrina. She's brave. And the reason why I tell that story is just to give an example of this process and also provide a little insight to what these survivors are experiencing and what they're challenged with. Enlighten. So I mentioned earlier that this is a dark topic. And maybe it's for our own sanity, but we have to also try to focus on the light that's in the darkness, the light that OUR aspires to be. The name Operation Underground Railroad, you can probably guess that we draw ties from the original Underground Railroad, respectfully. We have a tremendous amount of respect for abolitionists of that day. And one that is near and dear to our hearts, her name is Harriet Beecher Stowe. Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852. She wrote it from Cumberland County, Maine, and I was actually recently there. It was very cool to be in that area. There was many abolitionists who came out of that area. It was the first widespread publication that really highlighted the atrocities and injustices that slaves were experiencing. So if you were in the North, you certainly knew that slavery existed, but most likely you had never actually firsthand encountered what was happening to these individuals, the atrocities. And so Abraham Lincoln actually credited Harriet Beecher Stowe with being the woman that incited the war. She woke people up to the issue. And we feel as an organization that this is a direct parallel to the situation that we're in as a society, right now. Most Americans understand that human trafficking exists, but they haven't had the opportunity to get close enough to it yet to really digest and understand what's happening. And our ask as an organization is that this is a collaborative effort. So right now I'm pleading to you, I'm asking you to participate in the process, just like Harriet Beecher Stowe did, of bringing awareness to the masses. And we can't do that alone as an organization. None of these organizations you're going to hear from today can do that individually. And that's why it's so important that we collaborate around this, create events like this, opportunities where we can have a stage, where we can have an audience, where we can have some ears that might spend a couple minutes just really actually focusing on this issue. Now, I'm not law enforcement. I'm not military. I'll just full disclosure there. So, like you, I once asked myself, what the heck can I do about this situation? How can I get involved? I ran across a documentary a couple years ago called Operation Toussaint. And this documentary actually tells a little bit more about OUR's foundation story, how we got started, how we partner with law enforcement, how we partner with aftercare homes. And I'm not even encouraging, I'm actually imploring everyone here to do a little research and watch that documentary. It's free on YouTube, and you can access it there. Toussaint, Toussaint. When I watched that documentary, I believe now in hindsight that it totally changed the trajectory of my life. I mean, I was in a healthcare career. I hadn't worked for nonprofit space. I wasn't a survivor advocate. I really didn't know much about human trafficking. But this information was presented to me in a way that was digestible. Also, just want to be clear with you guys, it might wreck you, okay? So just because it's digestible doesn't mean that it won't affect you. My hands were on fire. I was like, I have to do something right now. I have to do something right now. But again, I'm not trained. I have no experience and have no business, kicking down doors in orphanages and things like that. So I had to really ask myself, what can we do? So my wife and I, we got together. We started doing hot chocolate and lemonade stands in our neighborhood just so we could talk to people about this. I wanted to shout it from the rooftops. You have to look at this. It's the most important issue, in my opinion, of our generation right now, modern day slavery. So you might be asking yourself the same question, what can I do about this? And to be honest with you, I don't know that answer. You know that answer before I know that answer. You know what your skills are, what your talents are, what your network, what your influence is. But I will try to give you a couple of examples of things that could benefit us as an organization and benefit these children at large. We need connections to corporations, to businesses who have a little bit of moving power to fund new operations and expansion of the organization. There's a business that we were just connected to recently that created a custom product for OUR, sold out in a couple of days, raised several $1,000s for the organization. They're now restocking to do another launch of that product. And this is a small business. I mean, these aren't necessarily huge corporations, right? So, I'm asking you to go through your Rolodex, talk to businesses, talk to organizations that see if they'd be interested in supporting the cause. Secondly, we're asking for introductions to congressmen, congresswomen. Find out from your local sheriff's office what are their needs? How are they attacking this issue in your community, in your counties, here in Houston? What's happening? And you'll learn a little bit more about that today from some of these other speakers. OUR does not go places that it's not invited to. But we are thrilled when we get the invitation to partner with law enforcement to supplement their efforts here domestically, to offer them things like electronic device detection canines, to offer them mobile forensic labs. That's what we live for, that partnership. We want to support and provide resources so that law enforcement agencies can actually combat the problem in their own community. That's that empowerment piece. We're a small organization, relatively speaking, right? I mean, I went over the stats about how large this issue is. We'd be delusional to think that we can do this on our own. We can't. And that's why it's so important that local law enforcement communities have those resources that they need to prioritize this issue and successfully rescue children, because I'm telling you guys, it is happening everywhere. 30% of the cases that we work are right here in the US. A lot of people are surprised to know that. So the problem is huge here. It's huge here. The last thing, we have an abolitionist club. We say for a link in a month, for a few dollars a month, recurring donation, you can be part of our abolitionist club, become a modern day abolitionist. They actually support over 35% collectively of all of our operations in aftercare. So we love our abs club. I mean, they are allowed us to expand into several new countries, and would invite you guys to join that as well. You can follow us at OUR Rescue. You can find more information at OURrescue.org. I'm on LinkedIn. Please reach out to me if you have questions, concerns, if you want to learn more about the organization, learn more about how to get involved. I would very much welcome that opportunity. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope that you enjoy the wonderful speakers that we have for the rest of this morning. So thank you so much.